You are live with the New Mexico Department of Transportation for the New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo Bridges Replacement Project. This recording is live, and we are recording it for posting tomorrow or in the future on the NMDOT website at dot.state.nm.us/NMDOT projects. There will be a question and answer portion at the end of our event this evening, but at any time you'll be able to participate by asking a question during our talk. Currently, we are recording this and it will be available on the DOT website. The presenters today that you see online will be just those that we have with us. However, more of our project team is available during the Q&A that will not appear on video during our presentation. If you need assistance for Spanish translation and you are participating online, you can select the interpretation icon in your Zoom toolbar at either the bottom or the top of your screen. As we move into our Q&A session at the end of our presentation, you will be able to join the conversation live, whether you are participating through the telephone or online this evening. If you are one of our telephone participants, you will be able to press *9 on your telephone keypad to ask us a question. If you are participating online through Zoom, you can either select the raise your hand function in your toolbar to ask your question live, or you can ask us a question in the Q&A chat in your toolbar that is either going to be at the top or bottom of your screen. We have a lot of information that we're going to be sharing with you this evening, so you may want to get a piece of paper and pen to jot some of it down. We also, during the presentation, will ask you a couple poll questions just so that you can interact with us and we can get some feedback from you right now. Kevin, por favor.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. Me llamo Kevin Alvarado y yo estoy con el equipo del proyecto. Primero, déjame darte las gracias por unirse a nuestra reunión comunitaria. Como parte de nuestra reunión, ofrecemos interpretación al español. Si está con nosotros y necesita interpretación en español, busque el link de interpretación en Zoom en la barra de herramientas y seleccione Spanish. Además, si desea hacer preguntas durante la presentación, coloque sus preguntas en el cuadro de chat de Q y A y le responderemos durante la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Otra vez, gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde para aprender de este proyecto.
Gracias, Kevin. My name is Jennifer Heyer, WSP Environmental Planner, and I will be your facilitator for this evening's virtual event. This evening, we're going to be talking about the New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo Bridges project. In addition to talking about the project, we're also going to discuss the NMDOT's development for the bridges and what we've been doing to study and identify what some of those design options might be in order to improve the corridor. For those of you who are on the phone who may wish to join online as well, you can go to the website and listen both online and on the phone. If you would like to join us online and you haven't yet already, feel free to go to linktr.ee/New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo. If you do decide to join us both using your telephone and online, you'll want to mute the audio online so that way you don't have any echo. I'd now like to take a moment to recognize the officials that are joining us for this evening's event. On the phone this evening, we have Senator Michael Padilla. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Hilma Chenoweth with the DOT Transportation Commission, District 3. We have Andreas Romero, House Representative, District 10. Welcome. We have Antonio Maestas, House Representative, District 13. Glad you could join us. On behalf of Bernalillo County Commissioner Cuesta, we have Chelsea Powers and Margarita Archibek. On behalf of City Councilor Peña, we have Rochelle Hernandez, my apologies. And we have Kathy Trujillo on the line representing the Pueblo of Isleta Governor Zuni's office. Again, thank you for joining us. On behalf of NMDOT, my name is Jennifer Heyer with WSP, and I will be your facilitator with this interactive event. Next, I'd like to hand it over to Priscilla, who's going to introduce our team members who are going to be presenting this evening. Priscilla?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Priscilla Benavides, the Central Region Design Manager with the New Mexico Department of Transportation. This project is extra special to me as I grew up in the South Valley and a graduate of Rio Grande High School. Go Ravens! I am now in a position to assist in improving the community in which I was raised and where my family resides. The NMDOT has partnered with an engineering firm called WSP to conduct this preliminary engineering study on New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo. I'd like to introduce our team that will be presenting this evening. You've already been introduced to Jennifer Heyer, our environmental planner with the WSP team. We've already introduced you to Kevin Alvarado as well, our host. You will also hear from Jill Mosier, New Mexico Department of Transportation Assistant District 3 Engineer, and the WSP Project Manager, Megan Myers, and Project Engineer, Nathaniel Miller, later in this presentation. Also on the call is Justin Gibson, NMDOT District 3 Engineer, and of course our host, Kevin, who I already mentioned. Everyone I just introduced will be available to answer questions after our presentation, which should be about 35 minutes from now. With that, I'll turn it back to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. This evening, we're going to talk with you about a couple of different items. We're going to explain the project limits, the project purpose and need. We're going to review the existing conditions and the data collection that we've been completing thus far. We're going to talk about the NMDOT project development process in the schedule for the current project. We're going to also talk about the proposed improvements, as well as the alignment alternatives and the evaluation that we've completed to date. We'll talk about next steps, and then we will close out the end of our presentation with a live question and answer session. Although we will be having the Q&A session at the end of our presentation, you may at any point during the presentation ask us a question through either your telephone by pressing *9 on your keypad or online using the raise your hand function in your toolbar, which will allow you to go live once we get to our Q&A, or you can use the question and answer chat box to ask us a question that way. Next, I'm going to talk about the project limits and the purpose and need of the project. The project today is the New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo Bridges Replacement Study. The project limits begin at the intersection with Isleta Boulevard west of the Rio Grande. The project terminates at the 2nd Street intersection east of the river near the railroad. Neither of the intersections are part of the current project. The current project is just focusing on the roadway and the bridges, and also the inclusion of Poco Loco intersection. The purpose of the project is to address the deficiencies of the aging bridge structure, as well as improving travel along Rio Bravo Boulevard. The need for the project arises from the specific need that the eastbound bridge over the river is aged and in need of replacement. In addition to the aging bridge structure, the travel through the corridor along Rio Bravo, the volume is quite high, particularly during the evening and morning commutes. In addition to the high travel capacity and demand occurring throughout the corridor, there's also the need to look at the traffic flow around the Poco Loco intersection in particular, which is also used as an access for the riverside picnic and park areas. Additionally, within the corridor, we have trails that are used for pedestrian and bicyclists that are not currently continuous, and part of our project and study is looking at ways in which to improve that connectivity for those using the corridor for recreational purposes, as well as alternative means for commuting using those trails. For those of you who may have just joined us, welcome to our participants online as well as on the phone. If you would like to join us online, please go to linktr.ee/New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo. If you don't have access to internet, that's okay. Please stay on the line and listen to our presentation. If you need a paper copy of the presentation after tonight's event, feel free to call me at area code 505-878-6577. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jill Mosier, NMDOT District 3, to talk about the emergency repair work that occurred earlier this year. Jill?
Thank you, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. As Jennifer mentioned, I will be discussing the emergency repair that occurred earlier this year. Last year, about this time, one of the NMDOT bridge inspectors discovered a bump on the bridge deck that led to an emergency inspection of the eastbound Rio Bravo over Rio Grande Bridge. It was discovered that the bridge pier was in need of immediate repairs. Traffic closures were put in place to remove loads from the bridge until the repair could occur. During the repair, while work was occurring under the bridge, the eastbound bridge had to be closed to traffic completely because sections were lifted off the pier. Since this was an emergency situation, the project had to move forward as quickly as possible. In contrast to the emergency repair project, the upcoming project that we are discussing here today had been in the planning stages since before the emergency. Funding had been programmed in the statewide transportation plan in early 2018. This project is not in response to an emergency or failure, but is being carried out to address the end of overall lifespan of the bridge. We know that this is a critical river crossing for the area, and since we can plan for this project, maintaining traffic flow will be a key project consideration. You will see orange barrels and there will be traffic impacts, but we will not be closing the bridge for the entire duration of the construction project. We appreciate everyone's patience during the emergency repair and look forward to giving the public a new bridge to utilize for years to come. Now I'm going to hand this off to Megan Myers, the WSP project manager.
Thanks, Jill, and good evening again to all of our attendees. As mentioned previously, my name is Megan and I am with WSP. And next I will be discussing the existing conditions and infrastructure being impacted as part of this project. Then later on, I will introduce the project improvements planned for this portion of the Rio Bravo corridor. Within these project limits, there are several pieces of infrastructure that could be replaced or rehabilitated. First and foremost are the two parallel bridges which cross the Rio Grande. These bridges are about 1,400 feet long, with each bridge carrying one direction of traffic. Next are the Riverside Drain bridges, which are located about 50 feet to the east of the Rio Grande bridges along Rio Bravo, also with one bridge carrying each direction of traffic. Lastly, we have two culverts under Rio Bravo, just to the west of the Rio Grande bridges. There's a corrugated metal pipe culvert that carries the Riverside Drain on the west side of the Rio Grande. And next to that, there is a concrete box culvert which spans an access path along the Riverside Drain. The Rio Grande bridges were the main focus for this project initially, and particularly the eastbound bridge, which had the emergency repair that you just heard about. This bridge and the eastbound Riverside Drain bridge were built in 1961, meaning they are both at the end of their 50-year design life. The westbound Rio Grande Bridge and Riverside Drain Bridge were built in 1985 and will therefore be within 10 years of their design life at the time of construction for this project as well. The existing roadway along the Rio Grande bridges consists of 4 12-foot lanes, 2 in each direction, a 6-foot wide raised median between directions of traffic, 10-foot shoulders on the outsides of the lanes, and a separated sidewalk along the southern side of the bridge. The parallel bridges at this location almost appear as if they are one bridge, but they are separated by a small 1-inch wide joint. In addition to the bridge and culvert crossings, there are several other aspects of this corridor that are being taken into account throughout the design and construction of this project. There are multiple utilities that cross the river and drains and are supported on the bridges. These include gas, fiber optic communications, electric, and water lines. As I mentioned before, there are riverside drains that run parallel to the river on both the east and west sides. Also along the river are public recreational areas, including a picnic area, fishing pier, and trail along the east side of the river. And lastly, there is lighting along both sides of the bridges and the corridor, which will need to be maintained. River crossings in Albuquerque are obviously critical for transportation between the west and east sides of the city and county. Existing vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic within the project area are all important considerations. Currently, this river crossing serves more than 30,000 vehicles per day. The NMDOT has improved Rio Bravo Boulevard from Prince Street to I-25, and Bernalillo County is in the process of improving the 2nd Street intersection to connect to those NMDOT improvements. This means the Rio Bravo corridor will be widened to 6 lanes from 2nd Street to I-25 to the east of the project we're discussing today. And this project is taking into consideration transportation needs from the Isleta intersection to the county's project at 2nd Street to provide continuity of travel and much needed river crossing capacity in the Rio Bravo corridor. To effectively maintain traffic during construction, the project team will be applying lessons learned from the emergency repair project to determine how traffic flow can be properly maintained during construction. We understand how important this will be to the surrounding community and the users of this corridor. In addition to vehicular traffic, there are several multimodal facilities within the project limits, some of which are substandard or not well connected, and some of which could be improved with this project. The Paseo del Bosque Trail on the east side of the river is used by bicyclists and pedestrians, but our data shows that most trail users biking or hiking south on this trail turn around when reaching the north side of Rio Bravo, and only about 10% continue south under Rio Bravo. There is a proposed trail along the Atrisco Riverside Drain on the west side of the river, and this project will need to accommodate that underpass crossing as well. As mentioned before, there is a narrow sidewalk along the south side of the bridges, which does not currently connect to any sidewalk along the approach roadway. And there is a trail on the south side of the corridor from Dean Drive to 2nd Street, which continues east to I-25. Lastly, existing shoulders on Rio Bravo are sometimes used for bicycle travel. The current conditions of the Poco Loco Dean Drive intersection with Rio Bravo will also be investigated as part of this project to determine if there is a need for additional controls, which could possibly include a traffic signal. The existing Rio Grande floodplain conditions are obviously a huge governing factor in the design of this project. One of the strictest requirements the project team is working under is the need to maintain the water level within the river after the new or rehabilitated bridges have been constructed. No permanent rise in the water level caused by this construction is allowed in this stretch of the river. Running along both sides of the river is a levee system maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. The design requirements for this levee system will be thoroughly reviewed as part of the study and design process to assure that the project designs do not compromise the levees in this area. Also, the proposed bridge components in and over the water will be designed so that impacts to the open water channel are minimized. Throughout the study and design of this project, coordination with regulatory agencies and other stakeholders will be critical to assuring all parties' interests and assets are being considered. The agencies we are coordinating with include the Army Corps of Engineers, MRGCD, the Bureau of Reclamation, Bernalillo County, Interstate Stream Commission, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now I will pass this back to Jennifer to discuss the existing environmental conditions for this project.
Thank you, Megan. As Megan mentioned, we have been coordinating with multiple agencies and stakeholders who manage resources and land in and around the road and bridge corridor. And part of that coordination has included understanding what environmental resources and considerations that we should be aware of as part of the New Mexico 500 Rio Bravo Bridges Replacement Study. Using that information will help us find a solution that minimizes its impact on the human and natural environment as much as possible. For this particular project, the environmental considerations and resources in and around the area include threatened and endangered species and those associated habitats, bat roosting and nesting birds, water resources, including the Rio Grande, the floodplain that Megan talked about, as well as the irrigation ditches, cultural resources, existing noise levels and how noise levels may change as a result of the project and those associated potential impacts, visual resources, as well as potential impacts on recreation facilities, including the Riverside Recreational Park, as well as the associated trails. Currently, environmental studies are underway as part of our study process, and the design will seek to minimize impacts to these environmental resources as we move forward with the study. Next, I'm going to introduce you to the NMDOT project development process and the project schedule. Currently, we're in the early stages of the project. We're in the study phase. It's very early on. The NMDOT calls that stage the phase 1AB. During the 1AB study phase, the DOT establishes why we are planning on making improvements and why they're needed. Understanding and gathering that data so that way solutions and potential solutions can be developed and identified to then look to see how those different solutions may be affected by the existing conditions within the corridor. As part of that study process, it includes us talking to the public and the area stakeholders to get that input and to share our information to help us continue developing the project. As the study progresses, we end up developing a variety of different alternatives that are then evaluated, that eventually the goal is to arrive at a preferred alternative that advances into the environmental processing and into the preliminary design, which eventually will then be that preferred alternative that becomes that which is constructed. As part of the study phase, we collect a variety of different data to understand how those different factors and features within the corridor can affect and constrain the development of alternatives. We look at right-of-way needs. We look at those environmental considerations. We understand the community concerns, seek to understand what available funding there is, discuss with those agencies, look at traffic access, and understand the geotechnical constraints, and those range of factors that are reviewed allows NMDOT to develop a solution that is balanced and meets the project purpose and need. We will be getting to our question and answer session at the end of the presentation, which will be in about 15-20 minutes. Next, I will talk about the schedule for the project. We started this study earlier this year in the spring of 2020. We've continued to collect data on existing conditions and develop some conceptual plans, which is what we're presenting to you this evening. We're having the public meeting with you now, and we will be seeking to gather that input from the community this evening and also after tonight's event. And we hope that you send us your questions and your comments. This will help us advance the project because we are planning on completing the study in the spring of 2021. Once we get to wrapping up the study, at that point we will have a preferred alternative that will move into that initial engineering design development, the environmental analysis and documentation. Right now, we're figuring roughly about 2 to 3 years to finalize the engineering design before we get ready to go to construction. Right now, construction is programmed for 2024. However, as we move forward with the study and with the project, the district will look at other funding opportunities that may allow the project to advance to construction sooner. Right now, there's over $25 million that have been allotted from the Federal Highway Administration for this project, and the DOT will be looking to add more money to this project in order to make it successful. And now I'd like to pass it back to Megan Myers, who's going to outline some of the proposed improvements.
Thanks, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, I'll go over proposed improvements for the project before our team describes some of the specific bridge alignment alternatives we are evaluating. Some of this we've already discussed, so I'll touch briefly on the big picture items. First, this project will provide additional traffic capacity within the project limits. ADA accessible sidewalks will also be provided, as will pedestrian continuity that is not currently available at this location. As discussed earlier, the bridges in this location will either be rehabilitated or replaced to bring them up to code and improve safety. Improvements to trail access will be incorporated into this project, as will accommodations for bicycles. And lastly, overall connectivity to adjacent roads around the project area will be maintained or improved to provide a smooth traveling experience for users of this corridor. The final width of the reconstructed bridges and approach roadway within the project limits will be wide enough to accommodate 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, though initially the corridor may still be striped to maintain the current 4-lane configuration until widening to 6 lanes along the entire corridor is possible. We are expecting to provide a raised median similar to the existing, and outside shoulders will be maintained as well. In addition to a widened sidewalk along the south side of the bridges, the possibility of providing a sidewalk on the north side of the bridges will be investigated. And now I will pass things off to Nathaniel Miller with WSP to discuss the bridge alignment alternatives that are being evaluated as part of this project.
Thank you, Megan. And hello, everyone. Again, my name is Nathaniel Miller, and I'm one of the project engineers working on this study. I'm going to walk us through the alignment alternatives that we're currently considering, and then I'll go through how we compare these alignments against each other to identify the preferred alternative. As Jennifer alluded to before, we're just in the study phase. The most critical end result of the study phase is to identify the alignment that we'll use in final design. The way this works in the study phase is you first develop a bunch of alignments and really you throw them against the wall and you see what sticks. Some of the ideas you weed out as having fatal issues, and the rest you flesh out until you understand the impacts of each, and then you compare them against each other. In a study, one of the options you're required to consider is actually doing nothing, which we call the no-build alternative. You do this to have a reference point to compare other alternatives against, but also in some ways to justify the project. For this project, doing nothing is not acceptable. The Eastbound bridge required that emergency repair in the winter and is nearly 60 years old on a 50-year design life, so doing nothing is not acceptable. Now I'll go through the alignments. Again, the project is from Isleta all the way to 2nd Street, but the alignment alternatives are the same along the roadway, except at the bridge location, which is where they differ. Most of the project complexity and expense is at the bridges, which is where we'll focus now. We have several alternatives that we'll present. The first several are alignments that would reuse the existing alignment alternatives 1 and 2. These may seem like the most obvious solutions, just put the bridge back where it is today, but actually they introduce the most complexity and cost, as we'll see in a minute. The second group of alternatives are brand new alignments, and we also have alignments that are partially offset from existing. And again, we want to emphasize every alignment has phasing to maintain traffic during construction. So alternative 1 would only replace the eastbound bridge, which is to the south and in the hatch on this picture. This is the only bridge that definitely requires replacement at this time. The complication with this option is the strict floodplain requirements that Megan referenced. Because of these requirements, we would have to line up the proposed replacement piers with the existing piers, which will remain in place. The existing bridges are built on a very large number of steel elements, which are buried in the river, and replacing the piers in the same location would introduce significant complexity and geometric constraints in avoiding this huge number of elements in the river. Additionally, this option would leave the westbound bridge in place, which is 40 years old at the time of this new construction. So in another 15 or 20 years, this bridge would still require its own replacement project and result in a long-term cost noticeably higher than if we just replace all the bridges with this first project. The remaining alternatives all replace all the bridges with this one project, which would eliminate those foundation issues by allowing us to put piers in new locations. Alternative 2 would put the bridges back in the same alignment. The disadvantage of this option is that it requires the most construction and traffic phasing of any alternative in order to put the alignment back where it is today, while maintaining traffic. As a result, we expect this to be the most expensive of our alignment alternatives and have the longest construction duration. The next two alignments are both new alignments. Alternative 3 is a new alignment to the north. The advantage of a new alignment is you can construct the entire bridge first before you really start impacting existing traffic. That separated construction is also very good for the contractor. It allows them to very efficiently construct the new bridge without a lot of phasing or needing to cycle in workers and equipment over and over. Because of this efficiency, we actually expect this to be the least expensive alternative, to have the shortest construction duration, and be one of the best options for maintaining traffic and minimizing disruptions during construction. The disadvantage of this option is that it has the largest property impacts to the north and the most impact to the bosque habitat and the Rio Bravo picnic area. Alternative 4 is also a new alignment, but it balances the disadvantage of alternative 3 by splitting the traffic on new bridges to the north and to the south. The result is that we have lesser total impact to the north, but now we have property and environmental impacts on both the north and the south. This alternative has most of the advantages of alternative 3 with separated construction, but it also has a few major disadvantages. And the biggest one is that the existing bridge would have to be demolished after the new bridges have been constructed and boxed in that old bridge. This would result in a lot of added complexity and undesirable traffic situations. So the last three alignments that we're going to go through balance the pros and cons of the last alternatives. They balance the pros and cons of using the existing alignment or going with a brand new alignment. All of these next alternatives build half a bridge first to the side of the existing alignment. We would then move traffic to this new half bridge. We would demolish the old bridge and then widen the new bridge to its final condition. Alternative 5 would place this partially offset alignment to the north. Alternative 6 would also place it to the north, but on a straight alignment, which changes where your impacts are. A curved alignment reduces the impact to adjacent properties, but a straight alignment reduces the environmental impact and reduces construction complexity by providing a straight bridge, which is simpler to build. Our last alternative, alternative 7, curves to the south, which greatly reduces impacts to the Rio Bravo picnic area, which is to the north. but the alignment has worse geometry curving to the south, and there is worse construction access for this option, particularly at the southwest corner. So those are the options. That's what we're currently considering. That's where we are today. Now I'm going to briefly go over how we're comparing these alternatives against each other to identify the preferred alignment that we take to final design. The list here are the criteria that we are currently using to evaluate the alternatives. We consider how each alignment impacts each one of these considerations, including the construction cost of each alignment, how constructible each is, the environmental impacts, the impacts to properties, how able each alignment is able to maintain traffic during construction, how it impacts utility phasing, pedestrians and bicyclists, the river, and the ability to maintain the bridges in the future. The last consideration is why we're here today, to get your input and stakeholder input, and that will be applied to our alternatives comparison as we finalize the preferred alternative. So as you can see on this next slide, this is a simplified matrix that shows or illustrates how we compare the alignments against each other. Each alignment has either an advantage or a disadvantage or is neutral relative to that list of criteria. We work closely with the New Mexico DOT to determine priorities to weight each of these considerations, but initially we just look at the total set of advantages and disadvantages to understand things at this early stage, and then we slowly eliminate alternatives to arrive at a preferred option. And that's where we are today on the later end of this process, waiting to receive public and stakeholder input, and then we'll work on finalizing that evaluation and selecting the preferred alignment. And now let me hand it over to Jennifer to talk about the next steps.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Very informative. Our question and answer session is going to begin in about 5 minutes, so get ready. I see questions already coming in. We are very excited to be answering your questions and get into the Q&A session. Just to let you know, for our online and telephone listeners, more project information in addition to tonight's recording will be available on the DOT project's website, which is dot.state.nm.us/NMDOT projects. Next, I'm going to talk about our next steps. Our next steps, as Nathaniel mentioned, we're gathering public input this evening and after tonight's event. Following the collection of your input, we will continue our detailed evaluation of the improvements, going through that and that evaluation matrix that you saw on the prior slide, ranking those different options to understanding which ones may be able to move forward. We will then prepare the Phase A/B study report, and the result of that final report will be the selection of a final alternative to advance forward into completion of environmental studies and documentation, as well as development of preliminary design plans. Once we've developed those preliminary designs, we'll go into final design, identify the right-of-way that needs to be acquired as part of the project, and then eventually we'll move on to constructing and letting the project. Well, now you've heard from us and we would like to hear from you. For those of you on the telephone, feel free to press *9 on your telephone keypad to ask us a question. For those of you online, if you would like to ask your question live, you can select the raise your hand function so that way you can go live in a couple minutes. Or if you would like to just chat and add your question in the Q&A chat box, we are happy to answer your questions that way. If you don't have access to internet, we have available information that we can provide to you after tonight's event. Also, if you don't have questions and input ready for us this evening, that's okay. You can still provide us with your comments and your questions after the event this evening. You can do so by calling me at area code 505-878-6577, or you can send your input and questions to my email address, which is JENNIFER.HYRE@WSP.com. But in addition to tonight's question answer and the ability to send me an email or call me with your questions and concerns, we have a web-based survey tool that we would love for you to use so that we can learn about your concerns and priorities along the corridor. For this survey, we are using MetroQuest. It is a web-based survey tool that is available online in English and Spanish. It is compatible with your smartphone device, with your tablet. It is also available for you to use with your laptop or your desktop. And we would really enjoy it if you would use the MetroQuest survey to provide us with some additional input in addition to sending us an email or answering and offering questions and input this evening. And with that, we are going to start into our question and answer session. To get us started, I am going to start with one of the common questions. We've already been receiving lots of phone calls and emails, and I am so excited that everyone has been sending information to us and asking questions, and fantastic questions. The common question that we have been receiving so far is, will the bridge be closed during construction, similar to the emergency repairs that happened earlier this year? And that is a great question. The answer is, the bridge is not going to be completely closed like the emergency repairs. That was an entirely different project, and traffic will remain flowing during construction of the bridges. And I will let a little bit more, or maybe we'll have Priscilla Benavides answer that question with more elaboration.
Thank you, Jennifer. We will be doing our due diligence to accommodate traffic in both directions. As stated previously, this is an entirely separate project from the emergency. This is not an emergency. This is a well planned out project. So we are able to actually spend time to really consider planning and designing to accommodate all modes of transportation. So again, the bridge will not be closed down. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Priscilla. The next question, I believe we have a online person who is interested in asking their question live. Kevin, is that correct?
Yes, actually, the first hand that I see raised is actually from Senator Michael Padilla. So Senator Padilla, I'm going to be allowing you right now, I'm going to be sending you a notification to allow you to ask your question live. You should be receiving a notification asking you to unmute. Are you there, Senator Padilla?
I'm here, Kevin. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you all very much for moving this project along. Thank you for having this community meeting. I hope we have several of these along the way. It was very thorough, so I really appreciate that. I actually, that was my question around, will the bridge ever be completely closed as a result of the construction? So that was very exciting to hear. Thank you very much for that. I saw a couple of the options when Nathaniel was speaking that it looked to me like maybe it would be closed, but I'm sure those are for very short periods of time, or at least I hope that's the case. You know, we worked really hard to pull all the money to get this thing done, and there was a lot of money that was pulled together from the federal level, et cetera. And, you know, can we get this thing rolling any faster? I was actually surprised to see, if I saw this correctly, that the construction wouldn't begin, it looked like, until 2024. I know there are steps, there are means by which to make these things as successful as possible, but any opportunities to move this thing any earlier, would anybody like to comment on that?
Thank you, Senator Padilla. That's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Priscilla, would you be able to answer that?
Yes, definitely. And I'm going to kind of tag team with Jill. Currently, the funding is programmed in 2024. So that's really the crux of why we will not see construction out previously or earlier than 2024. But it is our team's intention to get this project designed earlier and have it ready in case money falls from the sky. We'll be ready to go anytime we have this thing fully funded. But I would like to let Jill respond to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Priscilla is exactly correct. Right now, we only have federal funds on this, and to the tune of about $25 million. As we pick a preferred alignment and we see what that construction cost is going to be, we will look for opportunities to move that up. Even if we do have an opportunity to move it up, it's not going to be next year. We still have to get through the design. We still have to work through the environmental commitments and make sure that we're going forward through, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, getting all the certifications in place. So if we don't get the opportunity to, it's funded in 2024. So we know that that's a worst case scenario. Again, as Priscilla said, if we happen to get a stimulus bill or something like that, we will be looking for opportunities to move this up. And we will make sure that if that happens, we will let the public know. We have a web page or a project link for this project on the NMDOT website, and you'll be able to see project updates there.
Well, I sincerely appreciate that. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. I sincerely appreciate that. I'll stop. I know others have questions, but I want you to continue to use me to get the word out, because I do have a pretty good communication channels into my district, which is directly affected by this. And I want to just say thank you for taking into account pedestrian, bike, and other paths. I mean, folks use, I've ridden a horse across this bridge before myself personally, and I know others have as well. And the fact that when Nathaniel was talking about the picnic areas and this and that, I hope that we continue to maintain all of those, community quality of life and aesthetic things that we really desire in our community. I hope that you will continue to keep those top of mind. And thank you very much for allowing me to ask a question.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. I really appreciate you taking the time with us, and we'll make sure that we get you the link to the community survey so that you can get that out to your constituents. Thank you once again. Okay, it looks like next up we have a hand up from Martin Garcia. So Martin, I'm going to be sending you an invitation to unmute yourself. You should have received that now. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Martin, thanks so much. We can hear you loud and clear. You can go ahead and ask your question. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? The question is, I live right next, I own and live right next to Ortiz Reynolds. And I was wondering, how is it going to affect us? And if we are going to have to move, and if we do, are you guys going to tell us ahead of time?
That's an excellent question, Martin. Thank you for asking that. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we are very early on in the project. We're very early on in the process, and so at this point, we aren't very clear what right-of-way needs may be needed or not. We are glad that you have joined us. I will let Priscilla elaborate on that a little bit more, but I also do want to let you know, since you are one of the folks that do live along the corridor, after this meeting at a future date, relatively soon, we are going to be conducting property owner interviews of those with properties immediately abutting the corridor to discuss specifically that, so that way you do have a heads up, because we of course do not want anyone to be blindsided by any of this, and you will absolutely be part of that discussion and process. So I will let Priscilla elaborate on the right-of-way a little bit more.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer is absolutely correct. We are so early on in the design stages that we're basically trying to determine what is our preferred alternative. That's why we are coming to you, the public, to get your input on what alternative that you like best. Nathaniel went through several different alternatives, and we really would like to hear back from you which one you like, which one you would prefer. Nonetheless, as Jennifer stated, we do have a right-of-way process that requires us to basically preliminary hold property owner interviews. Once we hold those interviews, we will determine the impacts to your property. As of right now, that is a huge consideration of these alternatives. We're trying to minimize impacts to residents, to homes. Obviously, we can't eliminate everything, but we are trying not to infringe on people's homes. So that is by no means a valid alternative if we have to take somebody's home. But in some cases that has happened. I don't foresee that being the case with this project, as the alternatives are more so impacting bosque and public park areas. But nonetheless, we will be conducting property owner interviews for all the residents adjacent to the project, and these property owner interviews are one-on-one. You'll be meeting with me again and probably a representative from the WSP team, along with contacts to the DOT Right-of-Way Bureau, as we have specialists who specialize in titles, appraisals, and acquisitions. So we will be contacting you in the near future if indeed you are somehow impacted.
Okay, that's the only question I had, and look forward to meeting you guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mr. Garcia. Next up, we have Denny Sanchez. Denny, I'll be sending you an invitation to allow you to speak up and unmute yourself. Denny, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfect.
Okay. I have about 4 questions. I'm the president of the Adobe Acres Neighborhood Association. And I know that there's going to be a lot of questions to me, just like everything else has been going on. First question is, what's the total budget again? I know you probably said it, I probably missed it, but what's the total budget on this construction? Does it depend on what side of the bridge you're going to go, or what phase we do, or what proposal we go in other words?
Good question, Danny. I will let Priscilla speak to how much money there is now and also that funding expectation.
Thank you, Jennifer, but I am going to kick it over to Jill, because like I mentioned earlier, this project is funded in 2024. I don't have the number right in front of me, but Jill's way better at numbers than I am, and I don't want to guesstimate here. So I'll let you talk about that, Jill.
Thank you, Priscilla. So currently the project is funded in 2024 at just shy of $25 million. We put that in there based on what we have seen other bridge projects costing in the area, such as US 550 and then ongoing New Mexico 6 bridge replacement in Los Lunas. And so we put a number out there. We will refine that as we know which alternative we're going to go with, and we get better costs at what that is. And since messing with the funding is my job, I will be looking for those funding opportunities to make sure that this is fully funded.
Thank you, Jill. My next question is, my opinion, I saw your different areas that you want to build it, like, one on the south side and one on the north. I know they're just going to do the environmental study. I think it looks like the best way would probably be, I know it's going to be offset, but on the north side, where it could all be built at one time and to me, less time constraints than if you did it 2 separate areas. That was my other question too, is what's the time line of this project? Is it going to take a year, 2 years on the complete project?
Good question. I will let Jill speak to that, because definitely there is a schedule that is already currently established based on the programmed funding. But as Jill mentioned, that the department is looking to find other funds to potentially advance the project. So I will kind of let her speak to that general schedule. Okay.
So the funding schedule, as we said, is in 2024. Due to environmental and when we're allowed to work within the Rio Grande, the Bosque area and everything like that, we typically will be starting a project in the fall. And depending on how many construction seasons we need to span that, we might only get some work done within our first allowance, which I believe is from September until March. And then if we need another season in there, then we will have to take it another year. Again, this is going to be dependent upon which alternative we go with. So it could be maybe a year, it could be 18 months. As soon as we know the alternative, we'll have a better idea on how long the construction will talk. I also know that Justin Gibson is one of the people available to answer questions, and he's our district engineer. He just was promoted up, but prior to, he was our assistant district engineer of construction. So Justin, if you have the ability, if I misspoke, please speak up now.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Can hear you fine, Justin.
Bridges of this magnitude, we definitely look at as multiple seasons. Usually what will happen is in a phased approach, one side of the bridge will be placed. We'll have to start a demo on partial bridge deck or one of the bridges. And then the third phase is where we actually go in and build the rest of the bridge. But that'll be dependent on the selected alternative. But based on US 550, which was an expansion, and based on the replacement of the bridge on New Mexico 6, these are all bridges that were replaced over the Rio Grande. They were multiple season approaches.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Denny, just really quickly, we do have a handful of folks to get through as well that are waiting. So if you can ask the next two questions just really quickly in succession, so we can make sure that we get to the rest of the folks. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Is there going to be any night work at night? Is it, and are you going to have to buy any property along the easements that you need? And where can I get the paperwork, as you know, an actual? It's like people are like paperwork instead of the computers and stuff, because I have a lot of older folks in my neighborhood, and they rather see it on paper than and see what's going on than on computer and stuff. But including me, talk about computer illiterate, I'm here. But those are my questions. And before you get to it, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate you folks giving us a lot of information out here.
Thank you, Denny. We appreciate you calling in with your questions. To address your question regarding being able to have materials that are not online, you can feel free to either email me or call me, and I can provide those to you. My phone number is 505-878-6577, and my email is jennifer.hyre@wsp.com. As we mentioned, we are in the early stages. But I in more detail on.
Hi, Jennifer, I think you kicked it over to me.
Yes, I did. Sorry, minor technical difficulties. Yes, Priscilla, would you be able to?
Sure. As Justin mentioned previously, this is a couple of seasons type of construction, so we will be definitely working at night. Depending upon what operation, we will know more as soon as we get into the development of the plans with the preferred alternative. Right away, I think he asked a question with regards to easement. I do believe I responded to that answer earlier with regards to right away. If a property is impacted, if we need via an encroachment, a take, a CME, a construction maintenance easement, a temporary construction permit, whatever right away issue there is, we will certainly be contacting each of the property owners and conduct the one-on-one property owner interviews to discuss the impacts and move forward with addressing the impact, the right-of-way impact. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Denny, for joining us. And again, all project contact information is available on the DOT website as well, which has been shared in the chat box a few times. But for those of you who are on the phone, again, it is dot.state.nm.us/NMDOT projects. Okay, we don't have anyone else on the line with a hand raised, but just in case for our phone listeners, if you would like to ask a question live, once again, just press *9 on your keypad and we'll get a notification that you would like to ask a question. Jennifer, I think we're ready to move into the Q&A chat box.
Okay, great. Our first question in our chat box comes from Julie Baca. Her question is, will this major project be coordinated with the city and county to ensure no other major projects are planned in and around the South Valley to ensure there are no increased traffic delays? Julie, that is a good question. I will let Jill with the district speak to that.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Julie, for your question. We have regular coordination meetings with both our partners over at the city and with the county. You saw earlier too, and it was mentioned earlier during the presentation, that we have a wide list of agencies we are working with, including MRGCD. We will coordinate those reviews. We will be inviting them to review the plan milestones as we go through them. And they are aware of the project coming. And this is one of those things where right now we have the funding in 2024, so the county and the city can plan for that with their adjacent projects as well. If we get the opportunity to move this funding up, then that will take some more coordination just to make sure that we aren't trying to detour or not detour, but allow for anybody that chooses to detour or circulate differently to avoid the orange barrels, that they're not going to be running into those other projects. So we are doing our best to coordinate that, and those other agencies will be reviewing the project as it's developed as well.
Thank you, Jill. We have another question from one of our online listeners who has chosen to remain anonymous. Their question is, forgive me, that chat box moves when you add stuff. Their question is, couldn't the park impacts associated with the full bridge replacement alternative that shifts the alignment north be mitigated by constructing a new park south of the new bridge once the old bridge is demolished? That's an excellent question. We have, as part of our stakeholder engagement, been talking with Bernalillo County, who administers and manages that park. And so that we have talked with them a little bit about that, obviously, in our coordination. And I will let Nathaniel talk a little bit more about your question.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. The answer is it could potentially be mitigated, yes. At this early stage, that has not been fully identified. For sure, by providing your input here today, that's something, we'll take this input and that will be emphasized. That's something that's still under coordination, so it's not certain, but that is definitely a possibility to mitigate that, yes.
And to further Nathaniel's response, the park is a particular type of resource that has a special environmental designation, and that will just be part of, if it does end up being that the preferred alternative is that which causes the mitigation for the park to shift to the south, there will be associated environmental coordination and consultation and evaluation to make sure that there is not a negative impact on the park of that being a particular protected environmental resource. So thank you very much for that question. Another question that we have is from Jamie Amazqua, asking, how will the homeowners along Rio Bravo be affected? We also have livestock and utilize the bosque trails for our horses. How will that be affected? That's a very good question. Priscilla, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, definitely. That's a two-part question. The first part is how the homeowners will be affected. As stated earlier with our right-of-way acquisition process, if you are impacted, we will certainly be contacting you very early on. As far as the livestock and the bicyclists, pedestrians, everybody who uses that bosque trail, it is our prerogative to accommodate all modes of transportation, including equestrian. So you might be a little detoured, impacted through construction sites, but we certainly will provide a path for you to utilize to get to the bosque trail. So at all times, they will be open and they will be maintained with signs and basically a designated path that you should follow to get to those bosque trails. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Priscilla. Next, we have a question from Susanna Tenorio. Her question is, at any time during construction, will traffic be diverted onto Poco Loco for any purpose? I am very concerned about traffic coming into our community. As it is now, there are a lot of people who drive at high rates of speed through the neighborhood to get to Rosemore, to get to 2nd Street. I would request that the issue of heavy traffic flow and speed be looked at as discussions continue. Great question, Susanna. Thank you for asking that. Priscilla, would you like to answer Susanna's question?
Sure. Right now, it is not our intent to detour any of the Rio Bravo traffic onto a side street such as Poco Loco. The intent is to accommodate all traffic on Rio Bravo within Rio Bravo. So we will have lanes open, at least one in each direction, eastbound and westbound, to accommodate that traffic. We will not be diverting Rio Bravo traffic onto the side streets. As far as construction traffic, access is going to be an issue in building this project. You will see an increased presence from construction vehicles and equipment, I imagine, on Poco Loco. So I will say that probably will happen. But again, it depends upon what alternative moves forward to the preferred alternative. And we can look at constructability and access and try and keep traffic or our construction vehicles off of those side streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Appreciate it. Next, we have a question from Kevin Welsh. Kevin's question is, does NMDOT have sufficient funds on hand, federal and state, to build each of these 7 alternatives? Great question, Kevin. I'll let Jill answer that question for you.
Thanks, Jennifer. As we touched on earlier, whatever of the 7 alternatives we decide to go with, we will get cost estimates and engineers' estimate of probable cost for construction. And that will be what we fund the project at. And like I said, currently we have just shy of 25 million, but if something happens and it's going to be 30, I will be working with our partners over at the Mid-Region Council of Governments and looking at what other projects we have in the area to make sure that this is fully funded.
Thank you, Jill. Great. Another question from one of our online listeners who's chosen to remain anonymous. I'm going to put 2 together because it looks like this might be the same person. The question is, what considerations will be made for landscaping on Rio Bravo, both east and west of the bridge? Will any irrigation needs be provided by non-potable water generated from the nearby treatment plant? I actually realized those are kind of actually separate questions. We'll lump them together in our response though. Priscilla, would you like to answer those questions?
Sure, I'm going to take the second part on the non-potable and I'll let Jill take the landscaping. So through project coordination, it is a priority to do utility coordination and conflict analysis. Currently, there's many utilities on the Rio Bravo Bridge, the existing Rio Bravo Bridge, and we will be meeting with each of the utility owners to determine where those utilities will be moving. I'm assuming the question is regards to potable water, drinking water, if there's a water line on that bridge. So we do not intend to do anything with treatment of the water, but it will be up to the utility owner who owns the water line to ensure that it is potable, that responsibility falls on the utility owner. The only thing we're going to do is basically work with them to try and relocate them so you all would have service. So I think that answers that question. I'll hand it over to Jill for landscaping.
Thanks, Priscilla. So for landscaping, we do consider aesthetic as part of the project and part of the process moving forward. It's usually probably going to be tied up with more in the bridge. But again, depending on whatever option we go with, we will look for ways to incorporate aesthetics throughout our project impacts in our project corridor. Any landscaping outside of that is usually whenever we work with our other agencies. So the stakeholders like Bernalillo County. If Bernalillo County says that they want to participate and do this, then we work with them to add any landscaping above a certain percentage that we allow for within our project. You know, a lot of our funding goes towards the transportation need. the county could also decide to come in and do something separately afterwards. So I hope that addresses your question. If not, feel free to message back and we can refine our responses.
Thank you, Jill. As a reminder for our participants, if you are on the phone and would like to ask a question, you can dial *9 on your telephone keypad. If you are joining us online, you can raise your hand in your toolbar in order to ask a question live. Or if you do not want to be live, you can always ask us a question in the Q&A toolbar. Chat box. The next question we have is from Nate Begay. His question is, are there ways to improve bicycle safety considerations in the bridge in both crossing the bridge and using the underpass? Thank you, Nate. That is an excellent question. I think for that one, I'm going to see if Nathaniel can answer your question to go into detail about some of the different safety considerations for bicyclists being considered. Nate?
I think I can answer that, but if I can't fully, Priscilla or Jim Hyman, you might pick up after me. So there are ways you could improve it to some extent, but it's early in the study phase that hasn't yet been fully evaluated. Any of the alternative alignments that are currently shown, could incorporate those some level of improvements or not. So that's hasn't really been investigated in detail at this point. This meeting is a good opportunity to provide that sort of input to emphasize what's important to the community for us to consider in the final design. But to answer your actual question, yes, there are ways wider shoulders could possibly be provided, but that adds costs. Or the sidewalks could be widened to accommodate bicyclists instead of just pedestrians, but that hasn't been evaluated at this time.
I can pick up from there, Nathaniel. So during our process through our Phase A/B study, we work closely with the MERCOG, the Metropolitan Transportation Group, who actually has a map of designated bike and pedestrian walkways. And we definitely tie in our design with their long-range master plan for that specifically. But as Nathaniel mentioned, it does, in some cases, it does increase cost, but it's a matter of we will definitely be accommodating both pedestrians and bicyclists. As far as improvements to the Bosque, we are only designing up to our specific right-of-way. So some of those trails fall outside of our project limits, and we certainly couldn't touch those areas. That would be up to the other entity who owns those trails and maintains them. Thank you.
Great, Priscilla. Nathaniel, thank you. Very, very helpful responses. And just to add to that, Nate Begay, who had asked the question, that as we mentioned, part of the study is for us to identify those areas where the sidewalk or the bike trail is not continuous and there are gaps. And this is your opportunity. If there is a specific area that you are concerned about, please send us your comments on that so that way we can look at those, because this is why we're doing this tonight. We want to hear your questions, and we're using your input in order to help us with continuing to develop what can be different viable options and understanding what we can do to best improve the corridor. So thank you so much for your question. Kevin, do we have any live listeners, or should I keep going with the chat?
As of right now, it's the only questions that we have are in the Q&A chat box. But just again, as another quick reminder for our phone participants, we do still have some folks on the phone. If you press *9, that we will be notified that you do have a question to ask live. And then for our folks who are online right now, you can use the toolbar to raise your hand in case you would like to ask your questions live. Otherwise, just start in the Q&A and we'll get through all the questions.
Okay, great. So the next question we have in our chat comes from Roberto Roybal. His question is, will there be any type of quote unquote vote on the alternatives, or will you use the surveys and any other kind of community input? That's an excellent question, Roberto. Thank you for asking that. There will not per se be a type of vote, but we are using the input received this evening and moving forward as part of our refinement of our alternatives and the different options that we're evaluating. Part of the DOT's project development process is to look at different alternatives and rank them based on community input as well as constructability, engineering constraints, potential right-of-way impacts, funding availability, funding constraints, any other variety of different factors, including how well the project and different alternatives also meet the project purpose and need. And so with that, in that development of those initial alternatives, which is what we've presented to you this evening, and we will continue to refine our evaluation of those alternatives to understand which ones are not really feasible and those that are potentially feasible, to continue our hard look at those to arrive at one that is the preferred, and then we continue with elaborating on more details and more detailed engineering on that. And community input is absolutely a part of that process, and you are helping us this evening by giving us your comments, asking questions, raising those concerns so that we can understand the priorities within the corridor and understand where your concerns are, so that that way we can fold that into our review and our understanding and development of and vetting of the alternatives. So thank you so much for that question. Is there anything that Priscilla or Jill you would like to add?
No, I think you covered it, other than to reemphasize. That's why we're here. We want to hear from you. So please provide us with some comments. Thank you.
Yeah, and as a quick reminder as well, we do have a very interactive community survey that just launched today. It launched simultaneously with this meeting. It is available at the same link that you would have used to register, linktr.ee/NM500 Rio Bravo. We want to get as much community feedback within that survey as we can. There's mapping functions so you can tell us about specific areas of concern, and that survey is available in both English and Spanish, and will be up for a fairly extended period of time following this meeting, and can be shared with your neighbors, with your friends, anyone who wants to give an opinion on this project. Jennifer, we do have a hand raised for one of our phone participants, so I might try to bring them on the line right now.
Okay, great.
So really quickly, the last four digits of this phone number are 5446. If those are your last four, you should be receiving a prompt to allow you to unmute. Are you, let's see if this works out. So if your last four digits are 5446, you should be receiving a prompt right now asking you if you would unmute on your phone. So I apologize. It does seem like we might be having some technical difficulties in having you unmute. My sincere apologies. One thing that we can do is provide the contact information for our project team once again, so we can make sure that you get a personalized answer. But at this time, it does look like we're not going to be able to bring you live. So sincere apologies there. Jennifer, do you want to give your phone number one more time so we can make sure that folks have the ability to access you directly, and we can make sure that we get these questions answered?
Absolutely. Yes. Sorry about the technical difficulty, but we definitely do want to hear from you and answer your questions. So you can call me at area code 505-878-6577, or you can email me at jennifer.hyre@wsp.com. So yes, please reach out to me so we can get your question answered. Apologize about the technical difficulties there. We were very excited for you to be able to join us. I also want to just reiterate that we are taking questions and input this evening and also after this event to help us continue to move our project forward. We would ask that you try to get us your questions and comments in by January 2nd. And the sooner the better, but definitely, we'd like you to aim for doing that by January 2nd. Electronically is preferred, just since we're all doing telework, but we're definitely excited for you to be giving us your questions and your input. Next, we have a question from an anonymous attendee that asks, previously there was consideration of adding another bridge about 3 miles south. Is that still a consideration? That's a good question. Priscilla, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure, definitely. I believe the caller or the writer is referring to a Pajito River crossing, which is certainly not in the works. It is not identified through our MPO, our long-range plan. So the answer to that question is no. Right now, the only river crossing is clearly the one we're working on right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Priscilla. The next question we have comes from Norma Dizon, and she has two in here, so I'm going to, and they're both about the median barrier, so I'm going to combine those so that we answer it all at once for you. Norma's question is, will there be a median barrier so vehicles do not cross to the opposite traffic? In addition to asking about median barrier where I see large vehicles drive over to turn around when they see accidents, will there also be an emergency lane on the shoulder for vehicle troubles or for moving to the side when emergency responders pass through? That's a really good question, Norma. Thank you for that question. Priscilla or Nathaniel, which one of you would like to answer that one?
I think I'll kick it to Nathaniel.
Okay.
The typical section.
Sounds good. Were there two questions, or am I just answering the first part of the question at this time?
We're going to answer them all. So will there be median barrier so that vehicles can't cross into the opposing traffic? And then what about the first responders and the ability to move them over onto the shoulder for passing through and troubles?
Okay. So to the first one, will there be a median barrier? The answer is it hasn't been finalized at this time. It's being evaluated. That will be evaluated as part of this study. The most likely option is that we'll replace the existing raised median with a similar raised median. It's more cost effective than a barrier, which requires wider shoulders and then increases your total bridge width. And there's not necessarily the traffic speed like there is on Paseo del Norte over the river, where there is that median barrier. It's not necessarily the same speed to require that. So it hasn't been finalized, but it's most likely that it will be a raised median. To answer the second question about emergency vehicles, the answer is that because the final section will provide 3 lanes in both directions, even though it may not be striped like that initially, that number of lanes very likely does not warrant an additional accommodation for emergency vehicles, because with that width it's a lot easier to move vehicles over. Emergency vehicles will be considered in design, but at this time it doesn't seem likely that there will be a separate sort of specifically designated emergency vehicle lane or exceedingly wide shoulder to accommodate that.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Appreciate it. We have another question from an attendee that prefers to remain anonymous. More of a comment than a question, but we're going to turn it into a question for you. Alternative 7 could result in saving a portion of the existing bridge and having it for recreation, similar to Alameda. Are you considering this? Good question. Thank you. Priscilla, would you be able to speak to that?
Yes, definitely. The issue comes down to maintaining that structure. The whole purpose of this project is to replace an aging, outdated, old bridge that has long lasted its service life. So at this point, it is deemed unsafe. So the DOT has deemed it unsafe, therefore we completely want to get it off our inventory. We don't want the liability of people using it for pedestrian or recreational purposes and there be an accident. So at the end of the day, the answer is no, the DOT will not keep that bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. And just to elaborate on that, because as Priscilla mentioned, that there is concern about the safety of the bridge because it is old and becoming out of date. But we just do want to make clear that the bridges are safe to drive over. It is just that the DOT has identified that due to the age of the bridge, it is time for it to be replaced. But driving over the bridge is completely safe. So thank you very much for your question. We also have a question from Anahi Garcia. The question is, if you decide for us to move, how much ahead of time would you give us? I am guessing this is in reference to if there would be property takes. That is how I'm interpreting what your question is. Priscilla, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, I believe I'm interpreting the same way as you. I'm assuming that he's, or the individual is referring to a right-of-way acquisition for a property take. As I stated earlier, we do not intend to take any houses. So the right-of-way acquisitions will be fairly minimal. The bigger impacts will be to the Bosque, the 4F property. But the parcels that are affected, we do have a right-of-way process and we will be contacting you directly and having a property owner interview to discuss the impacts to your property. So there's more to come once we move forward with the preferred alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Another question we have from one of our listeners, one of our anonymous attendees. The question is, the bicycle paths along the river are paved on the east side of the river all the way through town, but they are dirt/gravel on the west side. Making the new bridge foot and cycle crossing friendly would make these trails more accessible and safer to get to for anyone on the west side of the river. Crossing the river on the existing bridge is scary, to put it mildly. I don't know if I'm sure. I think I might have read that as a comment. I'm not exactly sure what the question in there is. Nate, is there anything that we could elaborate on here?
Yeah, so I think to turn it into a question, I will say that this project will look to improve that pedestrian and bicycle accessibility. As referenced in the comment, yes, the east approach to the bridges is definitely paved. There is not currently any paved access to the bridge structure itself. Right now, a pedestrian would have to basically climb a dirt hill to get up to the bridge, and then the bridge sidewalk is only 4 feet wide currently. This project will look to improve that and provide an ADA accessible facility, so that will be paved or accommodated. The bridge and that connection out there today, again, were built in 1961. If we replace it with this project, we'll bring that up to current ADA standards, and it will improve that to something not scary.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Appreciate it. For our next question, hola, Lorena. Gracias. The question, Lorena's question is, when will you communicate with the homeowners? Kevin, would you be able to respond to Lorena's question for us?
Yeah, I'll repeat it in English first. So the question is, when will you respond to homeowners? It's a little broad, so it might be to the immediately adjacent homeowners. So I'm saying that we will be following up with the immediately adjacent homeowners and property owners following this meeting, actually. So we'll be having stakeholder property interviews to communicate what our priorities are for the project and the process to go through. En español, nosotros vamos a comunicarnos con los dueños de la casa, de todas las casas que están sobre el puente después de esta junta. Pero ahorita el proceso es que vamos a ver cuál opción es el mejor, cuál opción tiene el impacto mínimo, y después vamos a ver y comunicarnos con los dueños de todas las casas que están allí sobre el proyecto y hablar uno a uno a ellos. Si esta pregunta es de la comunidad en general, esto es lo que estamos haciendo ahorita. Esta junta es para la comunidad, para decir a todos lo que está pasando con este proyecto, y queremos que ustedes están involucrados, saben lo que está pasando con este proyecto y ayudan a nosotros para hacer el proyecto mejor que puede ser. That last bit that I said is, if this question is more generally speaking about how we're going to speak to community members, that's really what we're trying to do here, is make sure that we bring as many folks from the community to the table as possible. We did have about 100 attendees here today, which is, a really great showing for this initial meeting. We will be posting this meeting recording online to be shared with as many of your neighbors and friends as possible. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear about your priorities, your concerns, any comments that you might have on the project. So please get in touch with the project team. And also, again, we really hope that we get a wide range of community members from throughout the South Valley and beyond to fill out our survey and let us know what works best. The survey is going to be available both in English and Spanish, and it's just something, a way for us to make sure that we're casting as wide a net as possible when we're trying to get community input on this project.
Hey, Kevin, would you mind adding that when we do those one-on-one interviews, we will be able to have a translator available at those property owner interviews? So the residents do not speak English, we will be prepared for that. Thank you.
Yep. Para si tenemos estas juntas con los dueños de la casa que están ahí sobre el puente, vamos a tener interpretación en español. Si las personas que tienen esas casas, los dueños, no hablan inglés, o si necesitan interpretación, nosotros vamos a poder tener esto accesible para ustedes, para hacer que todos ya saben lo que está pasando y que podemos comunicarnos mejor.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Next, we have a question from Martin Garcia. Martin's question is, can you guys do something now to help us who live next to the bridge? Other vehicles are always on our tail when we try to turn into our homes. I'm talking about me and my neighbors who live next to Ortiz Rentals. We almost always are really close to get rear-ended by other cars. Martin, thank you for your question. I appreciate it. Priscilla, would you like to elaborate on Martin's question?
Yes, definitely. But the reality is I'm going to kick it over to Jill, as Jill oversees the operations for the district, specifically to traffic. And she can have her staff look at a safety measure that could possibly be done in the interim. But clearly it has to be evaluated first, but let me let Jill elaborate on that. Thank you.
Jill, it looks like you are muted.
Yes, I was. I'm sorry. I had moved around some things on my screen so that I could try. Nate had even mentioned that he had Google Earth opened. Unfortunately, my Zoom screen was over where I had my my Google Earth so that I could try to open up, but I believe there was a And Martin, if you can, please clarify if I'm not correct whenever I address this. I believe there was another comment about Dean Drive, which is, I think, across from Poco Loco. So earlier in the presentation tonight, you heard that we are going to, as part of this, not only be replacing the bridge, possibly rehabilitating the other bridge, but we are going to be studying how that intersection is functioning. And if signal warrants are met, we would look at putting a signal there. That does not mean that there will be one there. We do an analysis that says whether or not one is justified per the manual and uniform traffic control devices. So we will take a look at that. We will also be looking at the area to see if there are any crash experiences, to see if and what other safety improvements for this area within our project limits might be, we might need to incorporate as well. I hope that helps. If not, please, message back in and I will address further.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. It looks like we do have someone online that we can bring in live. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, so Gary Kaiser, you have your hand raised, so I'm going to be sending you a notification right now that should allow you to talk. It will be asking you to unmute, and once you do that, we hopefully should be able to hear you. So Gary, I'm sending you that notification now, and you should be getting a request to unmute yourself. Gary, are you there?
Question. If they're going to build the
bridge.
Are you going to build the overpass at Rio Bravo and Coors, and if so, when?
I thought you were talking about over the railway.
Over the railway.
Over the railway.
The other one is, what are you going to do with that railroad? That thing causes more traffic backup than the bridge.
Thank you for your question, Gary. I will let Priscilla answer your question.
Sure. So on Rio Bravo, there's several tracks. The first one I think is at 2nd Street, and our project limits do not go to that. Although I think we mentioned earlier in the presentation that Bernalillo County does have a project that's currently under design at the intersection of Rio Bravo and 2nd that will, I would imagine, assist in the safety enhancements of that railroad crossing. There's also a railroad crossing east of Broadway, which was in the limits of the Rio Bravo interchange that we recently completed, and we are certainly not going back to that interchange. So to answer your questions with regards to the railroad crossings, right now this project will not be addressing either of the 2 tracks that runs through the Rio Bravo corridor.
Great, thank you so much, Gary, for calling in. All right, and I might try to one more time to see if we can get our phone participant online. Last 4 digits are 5446. You may have received a prompt to press a couple of more buttons on your dial pad to unmute. If you did, that should give you the opportunity. I believe it's *6. But you should have received that prompt just a moment ago, and we'll give you just a second to see if we can get you on. Again, the phone participant with the last 4 digits, 5446. Okay, apologies. It looks like we may still have issues with getting you online, but again, please get in contact with our project team. We'll make sure that we get your questions answered as soon as we can. It will provide that phone number again here towards the end of the meeting.
Absolutely. Sorry that they aren't able to join, but we will be able to give you the contact information and hear from you. We have another question from Martin Garcia. His question is also, there are cars that always speed in front of our house by the Dean Drive on the little side road. Can you guys put up speed bumps? I have children and grandchildren who play there. Excellent question, Martin. Thank you. Jill, could you speak to Martin's question?
I can. Depending on where this actual location falls at within the DOT right of way, we could look at traffic enhancement. For that, we don't usually do speed bumps. If this is a private or a county road, you would need to work with those, well, if it's a county road, with the county to ask them about that and what their policies are regarding speed bumps. If it is a private road, then neither of the agencies would be available to assist.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. How will this project affect homes on Kelsey Road and La Mora Lane? Nathaniel, could you answer that question for us?
Yes, and I'm going to partially answer this question, then I'm going to throw it to maybe Priscilla or Jill. And just for everyone's quick reference on our team, Kelsey Road is the road north of Rio Bravo. It's a side road for homes on the west side of the project. And then La Mora is similarly on the west, and it's just the south set of properties. So to answer part of that question, if you are on the far side of the road from the project, you won't be impacted. If you are adjacent to the corridor on the side of the road adjacent to Rio Bravo, you could potentially be impacted, as has been referenced earlier, and there would be a in-person interview, or there'd be a line of communication from the New Mexico DOT to reach out and discuss that. Jill or Priscilla, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Nate, Nathaniel, your explanation fits. It's as we've reiterated, as we know who's going to be impacted and how. We will be having those conversations with the property owners. Like Priscilla, I believe, had mentioned earlier, that we're trying to avoid any full takes, any takes of an entire property or a home. It looks like there might be what we call strip takes. So, you know, any coordination with that, we will be having those conversations one-on-one.
Thank you, Jill and Nathaniel. Appreciate it. Next, we have a question from Robert Rose. Robert's question is, the fire department uses the northwest side of the Bosque/river as a launching point for our boat for river rescue. During this project, we might need an alternative launching point due to construction. Can we work together for a new or a more permanent launch location during the project and after? Thank you so much, Robert, for your question. This is very helpful information to know. Thank you. Priscilla, could you speak to Robert's question?
Yes, I can. And thank you, Robert, for sending in this question, as I was unaware of that. We will work closely with you in coordination with the fire department to determine a new launch. I guess from my perspective, I need to understand, how often do you do these launches? How many boats are you launches? How long does it take you to do a launch? I need to know more specifics, but it was certainly something that we can discuss with you or other members of the fire department in moving forward with our alternatives. So we will be reaching out to you all to figure this out so we can detail it out a little better. And then, of course, with our preferred alternative, we're going to have to accommodate you not only during construction, but our preferred alternative. The preferred alternative, we can have accommodate a more permanent location or provide access to that location. So thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I was unaware that you use this location for the launch. So we appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Robert. And Robert, if you would, because we do want to have more conversations with you so that way we can address this. If you would either call me or email me, my phone number is area code 505-878-6577, or you can email me, which is at JENNIFER.HYRE@WSP.com. And if there are any other of our listeners and participants that have questions and comments or need additional information, whether that be paper copies or anything, you can call me at that number. Send me an email. Also, there is information that is available on the NMDOT projects page, which is dot.state.nm.us/NMDOT projects. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. The question is, will anything be done about noise pollution for homes around Rio Bravo? Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Priscilla, would you be able to answer this question?
Sure. As we move forward from phase 1AB, we're going to move into phase C, which is our environmental aspect of the project. At this point, we will be required to do noise analysis to determine the impacts of the increased volume of noise as we move the alignment either north or south to see the impacts in the neighborhood. We will do this analysis to determine what level of mitigation that we need to provide to account for the additional noise. The accommodation could be along the tunes of a sound wall or something to that effect. But yes, this is something that we will be addressing as we progress through into phase C of the project. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Priscilla. We have another question from Senator Padilla. Senator Padilla's question/comment is, thank you again for hosting this community input meeting. When should we expect another update on the project, either virtually or in person, post-pandemic? That is an excellent question. Following this meeting, we will be reaching out to our to the community to get the word out about our MetroQuest survey, because we really do want the community to give us feedback using that tool, as well as just individually about their concerns on the project. And we will have additional public meetings coming up, and we'll also be having the property owner interviews, as we mentioned earlier. At this point, we don't have a date set for our next public meeting event right now, but we will be having, like I said, additional post-meeting follow-up communications. And also there will be information posted on the DOT website. Is there anything, Priscilla or Jill, that you would like to add regarding Senator Padilla's question?
No, I believe you covered it. Again, just to reiterate, the intent is to get feedback and comments tonight, and we will certainly be following up with you. And when we do host our next event, we do have all your guys' information as you signed up for this virtual meeting. We will send the emailer out or notification to everyone that has signed up. So we will keep all this information and use it for our next meeting down the road. Thank you.
And just one other item as well is we do want to make sure that we're getting out information about this project as it advances. So if you are someone who would like to know what's happening on this project, you do have the ability on the survey to join our email list. And we built a comprehensive email list leading up to this meeting, which included representatives from the neighborhood associations, schools, as well as several community members. And again, thank you, Senator Padilla, for providing your South Valley email list, which we use to notify community members as well. But for other members of the community, you do have the ability to join our email list, either by giving us your information on the MetroQuest survey, or sending us an email with project questions as well. So I think with that, we actually are, on one point of clarification, it does look like we did have a little bit of an issue with the link that we provided. We included a period at the end of the Linktree link, which might make it seem like the link does not work. Just remove the period and it will work. So that link one more time is linktr.ee/NM500 Rio Bravo. just take out the period and it should work just fine. It's the same link that you would have used to register for this meeting. We don't have any questions on the docket right now, but if you do have any last minute questions, we do still have several people on the line here from the community. Please feel free to put them in. We'll make sure that we get to everything we can. Otherwise, we'll wait a few minutes before wrapping up.
And while anybody might be coming up with some additional questions or comments, I just wanted to add, I know that Senator Padilla was very involved with the DOT whenever we had the emergency project. We will continue to provide updates to his office about this project. I know that he has the constituents that reach out to him, and he has his mailing list. So we will continue that level of coordination with his office as well. And we appreciate his ongoing support of the projects that we have in the area to improve the transportation network through the South Valley.
Well, it doesn't look like we're having any more questions coming in, which must mean that we did a very good job of answering all of your questions. So, all right, with that, we are going to wrap this up. We recognize that right now is a difficult time for all of us and all of our communities, and we are so grateful for you to have joined us this evening. We appreciate it. We had wanted to meet with you face-to-face, but with the current situation, that wasn't possible, but we're grateful for the ability to be able to offer this as an alternative platform to be able to come to you, hear your concerns, get your input, bring the project to you, and have you help us advance the project forward, because this is a very important project for Albuquerque and the South Valley in particular. And with that, we will be coming back to you in the future. So this is not your first time and only time to be giving us input, asking your questions. So you will be seeing us again. Make sure you do ask those questions, give us your input. And I hope that all of you enjoyed our presentation this evening. Thank you very much for participating. Stay safe and good night.
Thank you, everyone.